Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm Nancy Hoffman-Vaniak, and I'm CEO of the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber of Commerce, and we're so happy to have you here today. We are partnering on this event with the West Valley Warner Center Chamber of Commerce, and I know Diana's here. I don't see her, I just see her picture. I don't see her beautiful face, but I'm sure on behalf of both of us, we welcome all of our members and our guests and anyone from the business community to hear more about the new stimulus and the PPP package that's going on. I don't see my friend Amy on here from another chamber, but we keep shouting each other out on who could get Vartan first on a workshop, and she beat me to it. But so before we get started, I just want to tell you about a couple upcoming webinars we have regarding the COVID vaccine. We have one on February 2nd, and that's going to focus on the vaccine itself, any concerns, commonly asked questions about getting the immunization. The other one is going to be on February 15th, and that's the legal and practical implications of the vaccine in the workplace. I know a lot of you, I recognize a lot of you were on our labor law workshop, and that was one of the big questions that Christina had touched on, and people kept asking questions. So we're going to dive deeper into the legal and practical implications of your employees getting the vaccine and what requirements and everything there are. So that's on February 2nd, February 15th. That is on our website at chamberstore.com/events. Fumi can put that in the chat when she gets a chance. And now I want to introduce our special guest. All of you are aware, of course, that's why you're here, that there was another stimulus that passed. In it, it contains 6,000 pages of a lot of information. And I don't know about you, but I definitely don't have time for that much light reading. So what we've done is we've partnered with our good friends at the U.S. Chamber, and the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber is a member of the U.S. Chamber, and they have done amazing things during this whole COVID pandemic to get information out to our businesses that we did not have to source ourselves, and we really appreciate that. So Vartan's here today. He's going to provide you with information you can use locally to help your business and what's available to you and answer any questions. So we're not doing this as a webinar because we like to be able to see people. So if you have questions, okay, two things. Don't share all your business information in the chat. This is not a networking event. I want you to use that for questions today. So drop your questions in the chat. If we have time as we go along, Vartan will answer the questions. If not, we'll take them at the end, or we will answer them afterward. We'll be able to get the information to you. With that, I'm going to welcome Vartan. I'm going to let him introduce himself and go right into our program.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and appreciate all the work that you're doing at the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber for all your businesses, especially during this downturn. Nancy is one of the best friends of the Western Region office. We can always count on her to give her honest feedback. She's very active with us, and we agree most of the time, and then whenever we see things a different way, she's always right, but we always work it out, and she's so active, and all of her feedback goes back up to Washington, to our headquarters, and so she makes such a valuable contribution. So I really want to thank you, Nancy, for everything that you do, for not only for your community, but for us at the U.S. Chamber. We're very grateful for you.
Well, and we're happy to partner, and I just want to jump in really quick for the Safe Small Business Coalition, which we started, and West Valley Warner Center is a member of. We were very happy to align our guiding principles with the U.S. Chambers, and that's how a lot of the things in the stimulus package got passed, was together between our two organizations pushing forward with 160 chambers across the nation. We were able to get the things that you're hearing today into the stimulus package.
Thank you so much, Nancy, again, for all the work that you do on behalf of your chambers and all your members. So I know this last year, 9 months, almost a year now, has been very rough on small businesses. We hear the stories from a lot of the small businesses in our communities, and I live in Glendale, so I'm very close to you, and I see this firsthand, how our businesses have been impacted. I know how difficult it's been with the county as well as with the state, kind of always stringing us along, saying you can open one day. So the restaurants invest all this money in the outdoor dining and in all these accommodations, and the next thing you know, they take that away from you. So we're very attuned to what's going on. And just to backtrack, if you remember, in March of last year, Congress passed the CARES Act, which was a $2 trillion stimulus bill, which, among other things, introduced this Paycheck Protection Program, which offered forgivable loans to small businesses which had been hurt by the pandemic. Of course, it had a lot of hiccups starting. We had some ups and downs with people getting loans and finding banks, but I think eventually they ironed most of it out. So the folks who really needed and wanted a loan ended up getting it, like I said, for the most part. And since then, Congress depleted a lot of that money. There was some left over at the end, but there was a lot of pressure on Congress to re-up additional funding, get some additional help. And we've been working on that since April, May, June, July, I mean, all the way to the end of the year. But with such a heightened political year, it was just hard to get something done. Finally, of course, at the very, very last second, late December, Congress finally passed a new stimulus bill, which opened up PPP for round 2, and also reopened it to people who haven't received it, and also increased idle money. So I'll go through that right now, kind of to talk about what all of this looks like. So just to kind of give you some background about how different industries have done throughout the pandemic. Before COVID-19, a lot of the industries were doing pretty evenly. If you see technology, retail, software services, travel, entertainment, hospitality, food services, for the most part, we're doing just as well. The economy was going very strong. After the recession hit following COVID-19, there was a steep drop off and everybody had a very, very difficult time. And as the recovery started, that's when you kind of saw the gap in which industries did better than others. Technology, retail, software services had a pretty good increase back up. But and then there were some lagging industries like travel, entertainment, hospitality, and food services. So as a result of this major gap, this is what Congress is looking at, is to especially help those businesses which have been hit the hardest. And that's why they re-upped some of these programs. If you look here, you can see how employment was hit as a result of COVID-19. Compared to February 2020, for example, the motion picture and sound recording industries had a 44% decline in entertainment. Now, this is important because it affects the San Fernando Valley tremendously. It affects the studios in our area. Burbank and Glendale have been affected by this as well. And then, of course, all the peripheral businesses like food services and several of the light manufacturers, folks who work in the motion picture industry have been hit very hard. Air transportation is down 24%. Food services and drink places down 17%. Apparel is down. And these are, of course, like wide swaths. This does not include, there's a lot of variation within industries. I talked to some restaurants and they are doing okay. I talked to some retail, they're doing okay. They were able to pivot their businesses to full online services, and they seem to do okay. No one's doing tremendously well, but some have survived and others have just had a tremendously difficult time. So as I said, Congress eventually passed the new stimulus bill. It's a $900 billion bill compared to the $2 trillion CARES Act. It's 5,600 pages, which is insanely long, but by Congress's standard, it's pretty average. I worked in the House of Representatives for almost 10 years, and it was just par for the course when they release these huge bills, and they usually vote for it within hours. They don't really read the bill. They just count on summaries, and sometimes they don't even read the summaries. They count on like-minded friends to tell them what's in it briefly in a conversation before they vote on it. So it really runs the gamut based on the member of Congress. But this was, again, an extraordinarily long bill. And I'll talk about, we don't know 100% of what's in it yet because they're still parsing it out. But I'll talk about some of the major points at a kind of a 30,000 foot level, and then I'll really zero in on the small business portion. So in terms of the individuals, how they'll benefit from this is that individuals who earn $75,000 or less will get a stimulus check for $600. Joint filing couples who make $150,000 or less will get a $1,200 check, and then dependents will also get funding from this bill. It also extended unemployment. If you remember, right after the pandemic, the CARES Act instated a $600 per week bonus on top of what the state was offering for unemployment. They've reduced that to $300. So you can still get $300 if you're on unemployment for 11 weeks. You can get $300 a week on top of what the state is providing you. In terms of small business support, as I mentioned, it brought back the Paycheck Protection Program. It allocated $284 billion for it, $15 billion in grants for live venues, and $10 billion in grants under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Some other issues that I'm not going to delve too deeply into, but if it affects your industry, please follow up with me and Nancy, and we'll get you some additional information on it. In terms of housing support, it extended the eviction moratorium to the end of January 2021, and there was additional $225 billion for rental assistance, and it did a number of other things, $45 billion for transportation. There's SNAP funding in there, and then a lot of money to get the vaccine out, which is good news. So one of the things this bill did was that it brought back the Paycheck Protection Program. It reopened it. So if you never received a PPP loan the first time and you missed out for whatever reason, you can apply for it again, because they closed it in September, but now it's back. They've also extended it. So they've extended it through March 31st, 2021. The other really good piece of news for the chamber industry is that it was extended to 501c6 nonprofits, which affects chambers of commerce. Now, throughout the pandemic, chambers of commerce around the country have been there supporting small businesses get through the application process and kind of guiding them and navigating them through the loan process. But a lot of the times the chambers themselves were really struggling. Nonetheless, chamber executives were working in the office from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. trying to get this information and support out to their members, but when they in fact were struggling. So I'm very happy to say that chambers of commerce will now also be able to participate in the Paycheck Protection Program, which is something that Nancy had been working on. She really helped galvanize a lot of chambers around the country on this, so we're very grateful for her support with that. There was also a second draw for those really hard-hit businesses, and I'll go into greater detail into how they're defining these hard-earned businesses. They simplified the forgiveness process for small loans. The loans that were $250,000 or less, you only have to fill out a 2-page document to go through the forgiveness process through your lender once you reach that point. There's also an expansion of the list of eligible expenses. So for the first round of the PPP, they said you can also, in addition to writing off the payroll expenses, you may also write off certain expenses like rent, mortgage interest, utilities. But since this new bill came through, they've also added things like PPE. If you needed to get plexiglass for your business or anything to keep your customers or employees healthy and safe, they've included that as forgivable expenses. The other piece of good news on this is that if you got a PPP loan the first time and you've not sought forgiveness yet, you can also, when applying for forgiveness through your lender, include some of these new expenses in your original PPP loan. They also overturned IRS guidance regarding forgiveness and deductibility of expenses. This, in short, means that you will have there will be no tax penalties for your PPP loan. In other words, you won't be taxed on the amount of the loan, which we're hoping is forgivable for your situation. And not only that, but any of the PPP money that you used on your normal business expenses, it would be treated as normal revenue that you would be able to write off and deduct on your taxes. So not only will you not be taxed on the PPP loan, but also you can deduct any of your expenses from your taxes that you got even from the PPP loan. And then the EIDL grant no longer reduces forgiveness. So originally they said you can get upwards of a $10,000 grant from the economic injury disaster loans. And then whatever grant you got in that situation, you would have to write it off. You would have to reduce your deductibility from your PPP loan. So if you got a $10,000 EIDL grant, and then you got a $100,000 PPP loan, for example, you would only be forgiven for $90,000 of that PPP loan. Now they're saying that all of it will be forgiven. So that applies to folks who will get an EIDL loan now, but it also applies to people who got the EIDL loan previously. There's also an employee retention tax credit, which all small businesses should really pay attention to. This is kind of like the hidden gem in the new stimulus bill. So for businesses who have experienced a 20% loss in receipts from 2020, from the same quarter in 2020, can have up to a $14,000 tax credit per employee. So, so the good news on this is that if you experience that 20% loss when you're doing your taxes, typically you write off tax credits in April when you're doing your taxes. In this situation, this tax credit is used against your payroll taxes. So most folks, whenever you pay your payroll taxes monthly or quarterly, you can get that tax credit at that time. However, they're also saying not only can you just write it off as you're paying your payroll taxes, you can even get an advance on this tax credit. And the other piece of good news is that you can get both the PPP loan as well as this tax credit. Originally, from the first round of the CARES Act, they said you would have to take a pick. And at that time, they were offering a $5,000 employee retention tax credit. Now they're saying that it's up to $14,000 a year. It would be $7,000 for the first 2 quarters of 2021. And not only that, you can also get the PPP loan while you get this tax credit. So lots of good news here for businesses. And I'll dig a little deeper into these. So like I said, for the employee retention tax credit, it's refundable, meaning that you'll get a check back from the IRS. So if your tax credit is more than you pay in taxes, let's say if you're going to pay for the first quarter of 2021, you owe $2,000 in taxes, but you have a $7,000 tax credit, the IRS will send you a check for $5,000 back to you. And that's per employee, and you could do that for 2 quarters for a total of $14,000. How do you qualify for this? It would have to be a business with 500 or fewer employees. You'd have to experience more than a 20% decline of gross receipts in a quarter compared to 2019. So you take whatever you're going to earn in 2021, compare it back to 2019. If it's, in other words, before COVID-19 hit, and then if there's more than a 20% decline in gross receipts, then you're eligible for this tax credit. In order to get this, the best person to talk to is your bookkeeper or your accountant. They should be getting some kind of guidance from the IRS. Also, if you use some programs or services like ADP or QuickBooks, they should also be getting some guidance from it. So that's who you talk to on this. It's either your bookkeeper, accountant, or some of those programs that offer your payroll services. Now, on the second draw for the PPP loan, originally in the CARES Act, you can get a PPP loan for up to $10 million. In this situation, you can get one for up to $2 million. But quite frankly, most of the small businesses I deal with will be okay even with the $2 million. Who's eligible for this? Businesses with fewer than 300 employees. You have to have exhausted your original PPP loan, and you will have to have experienced more than a 25% decline of gross receipts in a quarter compared to 2019. So you have to if you meet all of that criteria, you can get a second draw on that PPP loan. As I mentioned, if you did not get an original PPP loan, you can now also apply for that. And the threshold for that is actually lower than the second draw on the PPP loan. In that situation, you only have to make a personal attestation that your business has been hurt as a result of COVID-19. So the bar is a little lower for that situation. You don't have to have a 25% decline. But for the second draw, even if you had a 5, 10, 15% decline, you would not be eligible for a second draw unless you hit that 25% threshold. Now, there's also these targeted EIDL grants. If you remember, a lot of folks who did not go for the PPP loan for one reason or another, like chambers of commerce, they went for this EIDL grant. And originally they had said you can get up to $10 million for the EIDL grant, but that money was quickly exhausted. So in reality, a lot of people didn't get the $10,000. They only got $1,000 or $2,000. But now they've reopened this program. They've narrowed it down, the criteria down, so it's a little harder to get. It's for folks who have 300 or fewer employees. You would have to also be located in a census tract that's called the New Market Tax Credit Census Tract. So in order to see if you're in that area, just Google New Market Tax Credit Map. Google New Market Tax Credit Map, punch in your zip code, and it'll tell you whether you're in this area. And if you are, then you're eligible for this EIDL grant. Also, you have to show a 30% reduction in gross receipts for an 8-week period between March 2nd, 2020 and December 31st, 2020. So as soon as coronavirus hit, for 2020, you have to show an 8-week period of a 30% decline. If you're eligible for it, you can get up to $10,000. Now, if you only got $1,000 or $2,000 from the EIDL program last time, you can also apply for that difference up to $10,000. So if you got $2,000, you can apply for another $8,000, and that will also be forgivable. And in this situation, it's a grant, so you don't have to go through the paperwork process. If you're only going to get the EIDL grant, you don't have to get the forgiveness process through your lender. In order to get this EIDL grant, you don't go to a bank, you go to the Small Business Administration. So on SBA.gov, there will be an application for this EIDL grant. Now, the good news with it is that, like I said, originally they had said if you got that $10,000 grant or $1,000 or $2,000, it would work against your forgiveness for PPP. Now they've gone back and said you can get both and you can get forgiven for both. And it's retroactive. So if you got it last time, then it would also not count against your PPP when you go for the forgiveness process. There's one additional item. I don't know if we have any folks from live venues on here, any live venue operators, but there's a really exciting program for live venue operators. It's a grant of up to $10 million or 45% of 2019 gross earned revenue, whichever is less, for live venue operators like theatrical producers or promoters, live performing arts organizations, museum operators, motion picture theater operator, or talent representative. And if you've experienced a 25% reduction in gross receipts, you would be eligible for this. Like the EIDL grant, this is a grant that you don't go to your bank to get, you get directly from the SBA. They haven't opened this one up yet, so you have to really pay attention to when they're going to open it up. They're saying any day, so you just have to keep checking the SBA for it. The nice thing about the live venue grant is that you don't have to go through for the forgiveness process through the bank. It's a straight grant, so you get it straight from the SBA, and you don't have to seek forgiveness from your lender. What's not in the bill? One thing that we worked really hard on at the U.S. Chamber is a liability shield for small businesses. I know sometimes you watch TV and you see these unscrupulous lawyers that come on and they say, do you think that you contracted coronavirus from the pizza parlor, or did you get it from a coworker at work? You can sue and get some money from that. What we were saying is that if you're a small business and you've taken all of the necessary steps, you followed the state, federal, local guidelines, you got the hand sanitizer, you got the plexiglass. If you did everything you could do and followed the law to a T, then you should have some kind of liability protection, that you should have some safe harbor so that you can't get sued. Unfortunately, through a deal that they reached from the Democrats and Republicans going back and forth, this was not included. This is something that the Republicans wanted, and were pushing for it. In fact, Mitch McConnell, the Senate leader at the time, had said that this is a non-starter for him. The stimulus bill wouldn't go forward unless this was included in it. But because things got so messy, he was not able to keep this in. And then the Democrats were really pushing for state and local aid, and they were saying that that's a non-starter. So eventually they came to a compromise. It's the sausage-making process in Washington, where both stood down. The Republicans didn't get the liability shield, and the Democrats didn't get the state and local aid. At the end of the day, we're just happy that something got done. So, but we're working really hard for this liability shield for the small businesses. I want to point you to a couple of documents that would be really helpful. The U.S. Chamber, I don't want to toot our own horn, but I think a lot of critics have come out and said that this was the best documents that have come out for the PPP process, the forgiveness process, these different guides. So please check out our website, uschamber.com/coronavirus. You go, there's information on there on the loan forgiveness process, and these are like step-by-step guides. The employee retention tax credit I discussed, the Main Street lending program. Check this out, uschamber.com/coronavirus. These documents will be able to answer a lot of your questions. And I'll leave the screen up, but for the most part, that's my presentation. I know sometimes I get questions, and I'd be happy to take them.
So the only questions I've seen in the chat so far will the slides be available?
Yes, I will send those to Nancy.
Okay. And we will also save the presentation as well and put it on our YouTube channel. So that way you'll have
Okay.
access, to listening to what Vartan presented as well versus just going through it if you need to see it later. I just want to let people know how to look up your distressed address, because it's also something that's used. We've talked about the Business Connect program, which is for the Super Bowl coming to Los Angeles 2022. If you're a certified business like women owned or in a distressed zip code, you could possibly become a vendor for the Business Connect program. So it's the same map that you would use, and you can go to, let me just tell you the website, or I should put it in the chat. I'm going to put it in the chat for you guys. That way you have it, right? And that way you can check your zip code for that idle, which I think would be a great way to look. And all you have to do is put your address in, and it pops up and it tells you if your zip code is in the new markets tax credit area.
Mm-hmm.
But Vartan, I was just on that page and I just see the idle loan. I don't know how you could just ask for more money of the advance if you didn't get it.
So you were on the idle page, you're saying?
Yeah.
So, and you were not able to find where you can apply for the new idle loan?
Just for the loan, not just to say, hey, I want an advance. What if you already have a loan?
That should be up now. Let me investigate, and then if I find the link, I'll send it to you. Usually they'll allow you to indicate on the form that you want the advance instead of the full loan when you're applying for the loan.
Okay, I didn't go that far into it.
Okay.
One of the questions is, if they got $19,000 from the idle loan last year, will $10,000 be forgiven?
Yes, it should. Contact the SBA, but the first $10,000 should be considered an advance that's forgiven for an emergency situation. So you should pursue that.
So I know with us, our advance came separate, and it was just like a direct deposit, and then you got the loan. So if you got that $19,000 separate, it should, but again, you should just circle back to the SBA and ask them. And if you're having trouble reaching the SBA, we can try to help you with that. We do have some contacts, not always great, but wasn't it 1,000 per employee up to 10,000? Yeah, it was, Steve. But some people beforehand were getting more money.
Yeah,
it wasn't being done correctly. The idle site on SBA, the advance funds have been fully allocated and are not currently available. So I guess there's no more. What?
For idle, they're saying that?
Yeah, yeah.
They might still reopen it. So I would just continue to check on that, check news stories. They're going to give first priority to those really distressed people, like I said, with a 30% reduction. But keep watching that and see if they'll reopen it, because the people who meet that criteria that I described, they're going to be the first in line. But at some point, if there's money still available, they'll reopen that.
Okay.
And yeah, for that question about the $19,000, contact the SBA, because they might be able to determine whether they can, transfer that as an advance. But originally, I would have, if you asked me a couple months ago, I'd have said no, because they depleted that money. But because they re-upped it, maybe they can kind of readjust how that figure was managed. If not, you're still eligible for a $10,000 grant if you meet that criteria. So if they tell you, sorry, that $19,000 is not eligible to be used as a grant, you could, provided you meet that criteria, you should be able to get a $10,000 grant now and have that forgiven.
Okay. So Russell, it's funny because that's the page I was on for it, but let me find the right section for that. Yeah, you needed to go to the map part. So hold on, I'm going to put this back in the chat, which is how you find out if you're in the area for it. Okay, so if you check this is the map. Okay, let me go up. Brian Charles had a question a little further up. I have several clients where the lender we used for the first PPP originally said they were open for PPP2, but now they've said it's paused indefinitely. Any idea why this is happening?
So the lenders that will be given priority for this batch of loans will be local community banks and it'll be local credit unions. So first start with your bank. In this situation, it seems like, you know, your bank is no longer accepting them. Your bank should be the one who wants your business the most. But if for whatever reason your bank is not accepting the second PPP, second draw PPP, I urge you to start with your community and local banks. Last time, since there were so many people, there was this, especially coming from big businesses, there was this perception that smaller businesses got left out of the PPP process. So in this new round, Congress wanted to make sure that the smaller businesses did not get ignored. So that's why they prioritized getting the funds to the local banks. When they opened this back up last Friday, they only released about $1 billion just to start getting the money out there. So some banks might say that the money has dried up or the idle process or the PPP process has closed, but continue to check because they've approved $284 billion for this. And so they're going to get the money into the right hands. It's a matter of just being really aggressive in finding a bank, because the sooner you're able to identify a bank that will offer this, then the sooner you'll be able to get your funding. So if a bank right away tells you, sorry, we've closed it, we've closed the system down, keep looking for a bank that will open it up, or keep getting information about what banks will be offering it. Because eventually, if you're in need and you meet the criteria, you should not have a problem accessing these funds.
Cool.
So, so Brian was saying it's third-party lenders like Bluevine and Cabbage. Now, I was able to apply on Bluevine on Tuesday.
Really?
Yeah, it opened up on Tuesday. So if you were doing it before Tuesday, that could have been your problem.
Yeah, I have clients that I've done the loans for that have applied to both Bluevine and to Cabbage, and they took the application, and then they got an email that said, "Hey guys, we're putting this on pause indefinitely."
Oh, I haven't seen. No, I better check my email because I didn't get that. So just so you know, I checked with a bunch of our chamber members because 501c6s were now eligible. And if we weren't an existing client, they wouldn't take us if we didn't have an account there. So we have US Bank and their system crashed in the middle of me applying. So that was a lot of fun for me. So that's how I ended up on Bluevine. But now that Brian just told me that, I think I better go back through my emails and make sure I didn't get something that says it's paused indefinitely, because it did not tell me that on Tuesday. If you find a bank, you need to transfer your account to them from the big bank you're with. Patricia, not all banks are making you do that. Like on the last round, like for instance, one of our members, Mission Valley Bank, was just helping people, whether they were clients or not. And then you had Home Street Bank, which was prioritizing their clients, but they were still taking non-clients. And then Santa Clarita Bank, they were doing the same thing. So the smaller community-oriented banks were more open to helping people. But now, from when I've talked to a couple of them, they're like, we're only doing our clients first, because a lot of them are doing their second rounds. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it really matters, but like I tried Bluevine, like I said, I didn't do Cabbage this time. My friend did Cabbage last time. Because Bluevine was referred to us by one of our member CPAs. So that's the answer on that one. Can we apply for the second PPP with the same lender? You should be able to, right, Vartan?
Yeah, you should be able to. But like I said, if you went to a bigger bank the first time around, you might have better luck with a smaller community bank or credit union. But at the same time, it's good to go with your existing lender first, because they're the most likely to want to keep your business. So try them. If you have like, you know, a big bank, a Wells Fargo or something, and then they say, sorry, we're not doing this at this point, then go seek out some good banks. And maybe Nancy has some community banks who are members who you can get some feedback from.
And you know, here's the other question. Can you remember on PPP last round, you were able to apply at 2 banks without waiting to find out if you were denied because it was closing so quickly, you know? So are you able to apply at 2 different banks at the same time?
Check with the lender, but you can only sign one loan, obviously. Right. I know a lot of people were very tenacious about this, and then they just got a bunch of applications out. So as long as, if this is the same as last time, as long as you only accept one loan, you should be able to apply for other banks at multiple banks. But check with your lender, because if your lender says, sorry, it's our policy that you can only apply with us, then you don't want to burn that bridge, especially if it looks like you'll get the loan from that original bank.
Right. Okay, let me see. I got an email from my bank that applications are open. Well, then if you got the email and you want to share what your bank is, that would be great, Lisa. So, because not like I said, I went through a few things to figure out what banks are. US Bank, yeah, I got that too, and I started applying on Tuesday to US Bank, and they crashed in the middle of it. Just stopped going. I couldn't go any further. I went further, and then I needed certain documentation, and then when I got, by the time and by the way, I have all that documentation ready because I was prepared, and by the time I uploaded the PDF, it wouldn't go any further.
Yeah. And keep in mind that the SBA is going to be adding additional funds as it goes. So even if they say it's closed right now, they'll reopen it up. But I believe they started with $1 billion. They have a long way to go.
Do we have any other questions? We're happy to let you unmute now that the presentation's over if you want to just directly ask your questions. Are there different rules for staffing industries, or are they the same across the board?
They should be the same.
So, but okay, Nick, I'm going to just ask this question. Do you mean because you are placing the people and they're not really employed by the other company?
Yes, well, we're a joint employer. We're a joint employer, and we got a loan. The first PPP, we got over $600K because we lost a lot of employees. They were our employees. We lost a lot of employees. What would the last time the qualifications were, number of employees you have and how many employees you lost? It was all based on the number of employees you had. Excuse me if I missed that part. How do staffing companies qualify this time, would you say, for the second PPP?
So it's based on your loss in revenue, like I mentioned. So if you got the first round. So for the second round for PPP, you would have to show over here 25% decline of gross receipts from the same period in 2019. And if you met that criteria, then you should be eligible for it. The other point that you reminded me, Nick, is that once you get the loan, you have to use 60% of the loan for payroll and the other remaining 40% for those additional expenses. So their main priority in these PPP loans is for you to continue to pay your employees instead of putting them on unemployment, because they want you to keep that connection with your employees. So you still, when you get the loan, you have to, in order to get it forgiven, you have to use 60% for payroll and the remaining 40% for the additional expenses.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
this was not a question here. This is a question from a group of chamber execs that were texting. If you got the EIDL and you never got a PPP, whether you're a chamber or whoever it is, they were saying, can you return your EIDL and just get PPP? And I said, I think you just repay it. I don't think you just return it. You have to, you're basically, because it's a loan that you've already signed a document on, you just have to repay that loan, correct?
Yeah, I think the way that the EIDL loan was written was that you had a certain period where the interest wouldn't show up right away, or I think it was very low interest. So you would have to repay it. I would just contact the SBA on that.
Well, and then just so everyone knows that my Bluevine application still shows it's in review. So maybe I got in before they ran out of money or whatever was going on. I never got the pause thing. So I don't know what's going on there. So we don't have any other questions in the queue. I don't know if anyone wants to chime in with anything. I do know that Congressman Garcia is also doing some sort of PPP webinar on the 28th. I don't know if it's going to be as in-depth as this. So we'll have information out on our Facebook page about that. Interest stated when the loan was funded, but payments deferred for a year and idle.
There you
Yes.
go. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I forgot about that, Steve. That's true. That's why I think, but I was telling my colleagues that then you just repay the loan. You can't give it back. You've already been accruing interest, in the meantime. So you have to pay the interest too. So, so as I mentioned, Congressman Garcia is also holding one of these events, but I don't think it's going to be as in depth. It's more going to be just talking about the process and everything. But if you missed any of this, I know some people came in late. We will have the entire presentation up on our YouTube channel, probably today or Monday. And I don't know, Diana, did you want to say anything? I don't know where you are.
Hi, yes. Thank you so much. This was great. Nancy, thank you so much for including the West Valley Warner Center Chamber of Commerce. We really appreciate you. And you are such a terrific partner in the community, and it's always great to work with you.
Well, we're so glad you asked, because this information needs to get out to everyone. So we're glad to partner anytime we can, and so more businesses can survive the economic effects of the pandemic, and we're all glad to work together for that goal. Oh, my light just went off in my office. So if you don't have any other questions, we can let you all off early, or you can just hang out and chit chat. It's up to you. Other than that, we thank you for being here. And don't forget, I know that West Valley Warner Center put their website in the chat earlier, and we put our events. We didn't put our whole website. We put our chat, our event, register for events website. So be sure you can save the chat by clicking the 3 little dots, and it'll save it. You can go back and find that information later.
Real quick, can I just chime in here?
Yeah.
I just checked on my computer for Bluevine. It looks like it's today's date, and they say they're up and going. So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, keep checking.
Yes. Brian, I'm wondering if you were doing it on Tuesday, if maybe the time you went in it crashed like US Bank did on me, that they just got overwhelmed. Just like I said, I was in the middle. US Bank is where we bank at. So who knows? And I'm debating to still go through US Bank because now Brian scared me. So, well, we appreciate you being here. And I guess we're just going to thanks Vartan very much for doing this.
Thank you, everyone.
We really appreciate all of you and your support of the chambers that you belong to, and for joining us whenever we can to help you, whatever issues keep you up at night, we're here to find your solution. So thank you so much, and we're going to let you all go.